समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome. My name is Zafar Iqbal and you are watching the Mojo Story. Prime Minister Modi on his first visit to China in 7 years for the SCO summit in Tianjin. He will be holding a key meeting with President Xi. Obviously, India will be stressing that stable and long-term India-China relations based on mutual respect and sensitivity are essential for peace in the India-Pacific, a multipolar Asia and global economic stability. Even as, according to a New York Times report, Trump's habit of shooting off the cuff with little regard to accuracy has made Prime Minister Modi wary of taking his calls. To discuss this, we're joined today by an eminent panel. We're joined by Ambassador Veena Sikri. Welcome to Mojo Story, ma'am. We're also joined by Sushant Sareen. Welcome to Mojo Story, Sushantji, and also Major General Neeraj Bali. Sushantji, if I may start with you straight away. This New York Times report that Prime Minister Modi rather did not take calls from Trump. He tried to get in touch with the Prime Minister, obviously because India is wary that what will he say later on, how will he interpret those calls that has happened in the past. He's been repeatedly making those claims that he was responsible for a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. He stopped the war. So clearly it seems that his ego is hurt more than anything else. And that's why we're seeing this reaction from America. It's more to do with that than with India buying oil from Russia.
Yeah, Zafar, I think it's quite clear that, this whole business that India is buying oil from Russia, this is Modi's war, that's utter nonsense, complete crap. But, it's a good fig leaf for whatever the Americans are trying to do. The problem is also not so much that, the government of India was not ready to acknowledge that America played a role. They didn't mediate. But look, even in the past, during Kargil, for example, it was the Americans who told the Pakistanis to back off, and then Nawaz Sharif went scurrying and signed on the dotted line, right? And he came back and a ceasefire was announced. It was not as though the Americans were interceding. And at that time, they were at least sensitive enough to what our red lines are. I think what really has peeved the Indian side, and for absolutely very valid reasons, is that not only did the Americans say that, or Trump, tweet, even according to this story, the New York Times story, that Trump tweets that, there is a full and immediate ceasefire. It is what Rubio did after that, that they will be meeting somewhere else, and
at a neutral place. At a neutral place, they will be meeting.
Something which subsequently Trump, I don't know, one of his visits, maybe to the Middle East, he said that, pointing to Marco Rubio, you could probably take them to a nice restaurant.
Yeah.
You start scratching your head in wonderment at what is happening to American diplomacy. Not always the most sophisticated, but also not, as plebeian as what we are seeing it. So obviously it was going to stiffen Indian backs. Now, did the Prime Minister refuse to take Trump's call? I consider it a bit of a stretch, frankly. It can't be as simple as that Trump is trying to say that, look, I want to talk to Modi, and Modi saying, no, I don't want to talk to Trump. I don't think the Prime Minister of India would, behave in that manner. And you also have a denial coming out from the White House that, it wasn't as though Trump was trying to reach out to Modi. So I will not comment too much on whether Trump tried to talk to Modi and Modi refused. But of course, some of the apprehensions which would be there in the Indian side are very clear. Also because Trump has done this with some of the other leaders.
Yeah.
You know, he tried to browbeat them on the phone and then announced a deal which was never there, which was never
Right.
agreed.
Right.
And then smaller countries find it difficult. How do I go against Trump? How do I say that, what he's saying is a complete lie or a complete fabrication? So there are those, there probably would have been those concerns, but was that the reason that the Prime Minister was avoiding his call? I don't know. Maybe Ambassador Sikri is in a better position to answer. She's been a diplomat. I'm anything but a diplomat. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a question.
We'll ask Veena Sikri, ma'am. But the fact is also that Trump wanted Prime Minister to go to Washington at a time when Pakistan's army chief was there. So there are clear apprehension that nobody knows, very unpredictable what he wanted to do. Perhaps he wanted both of them to come together in a frame because he was already pitching for a Nobel Prize, and Pakistan has in fact recommended him for the Nobel Prize. So it's very complicated. It's not that simple. We have to understand the person that Trump is, Ambassador Veena Sikri.
That first of all, our Prime Minister has been fully consistent all the time, right from immediately after Pelgam, and then the May events, 9th and 10th, Operation Sindoor, all of that. The fact of the matter is that America's foreign policy had always accepted that they will not mediate between India and Pakistan. Always, even President Clinton, even we're talking of Kargil, yes, Pakistan keeps running towards the Americans because they keep telling America, I'm so useful for you, I'll do this for you, X, Y, Z, all of that, and this is what you have to do. So Pakistan has consistently been trying to internationalize the Kashmir issue, and we have always said, and especially after the Shimla summit, the Shimla agreement, this was the key issue there. Only a bilateral solution is to be sought for the Kashmir issue. And America has accepted this all along. So I think what is most disconcerting for Prime Minister Modi and for the government of India, and I would say for the people of India, why is President Trump seeming to change this position? Because he's going on and on talking not only about what happened in Operation Sindoor, but also as Sushant just said, subsequently, okay, we'll do this, we'll have a meeting here, we'll have a meeting there. This is completely not acceptable. And given the good relations that have built up between all presidents of the USA and India, and particularly with Prime Minister Modi over the last 10 years, under President Trump's first term and now his second term, we did not expect this at all, that you'll suddenly have a change on an issue which they know is absolutely central to India's foreign policy and absolutely clear that on which India will not change its position, which is a red line. And Dr. Jaishankar, in one of his recent statements, he drew 3 clear red lines for India. The third red line was that we will never accept third-party mediation on India and Pakistan. We will continue to buy Russian oil. And on trade and tariffs, we will continue to protect our farmers, our dairy farmers, our fishermen, and all small and micro entrepreneurs. So I think this is what it is, and that is why Prime Minister Modi, after seeing all this time, that despite Prime Minister Modi having explained in the last telephone call, which took place while Prime Minister Modi was in Canada for the G7, that that made no difference. He explained again directly, one-to-one. I think before that there had been no conversation between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, and even directly otherwise there was no mention of trade. Every person in India, Dr. Jaishankar, the Foreign Secretary, everybody said there's never been any talk of trade in the context of what happened, Operation Sindoor or post-Operation Sindoor or anything like that. Never any mention of trade, and suddenly it comes in that I use the Trade Act. So I think that this is the biggest area of concern. Why this sudden change on a policy of the American system that was a bipartisan approach? It was a bipartisan policy. And suddenly, why is President Trump, after the first term, that he was so, forthcoming in the relationship with India, and what he said about Pakistan in the first term, and now what he's doing with Asim Munir? This question of wanting Prime Minister Modi to come to Washington when we know that Asim Munir is going to be there. it's
And
unbelievable, you know,
and,
actually.
and strangely, after that conversation, that telephonic talk between the Prime Minister and President Trump, he repeated what he said. It is
Yes.
not that he changed his stand, and it is not only Trump who's making these statements. What about his advisor Navarro and others saying that it's Modi's war, and India is arrogant and they are the tariff king? It is not. When you say that this relationship has been built since many decades now and it's reached this point and it's multidimensional, why do we see such a sudden change from America, from the administration, right from President Trump and his advisors? Almost on a daily basis we wake up to a new statement. General Bali.
Well, I think to expect anything out of this administration in terms of rationale or logic, we be here for years and we won't be able to make sense of what they're doing. It's trying to read pattern into randomness. The old templates are gone, the norms are gone, there is no paradigm. Something new happens every single day. So it's impossible to say, but it's clearly something very personal. I completely agree with Sushant that it's complete nonsense that it has anything to do with anything like trade or like oil or things like that. It is something trenchantly personal. That is very clear. The way he's gone out of the way to be abrasive, the way he's not just attacked us in terms of tariffs, he's attacked our right to be sovereign in many ways. I think the other explanation is that there is this right wing MAGA ideologues led by Steve Bannon and other people who have written out the document called whatever 2025 or things like that. And they are simply pursuing that policy. It's the overall policy has been written down. Now it is the implementation. And as far as other advisors are concerned and diplomats are concerned, who's left in America? Everybody seems to have fallen in line. Marco Rubio is a pale shadow himself. He is no longer the confident diplomat he was. He's simply just mouthing whatever Trump says. So I think let's not try to read too much into why he said this and why is he going to say next thing, because you can't make sense of this. The best you can do is to steel yourself the way our government has very rightly done and prepare for a response. That's the best you can do.
Right. And even if there is a MAGA strategy, so to say, how is targeting India going to help that? But Sushant Sareen, coming to Prime Minister's visit of China, it's come at a time when all of this is happening. Can India really trust China? Let's take America out of the picture. Can India really trust China at this point in time?
Yeah, let me, say something to what General Bali was saying. There is a lot we can do actually. I have a suggestion. Let us recommend Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, because at least that will get him off our backs. That will get him off the world's back. Yeah, he's trying to meddle into things in which he has no knowledge, he has no interest, nothing. So yeah, give him a bloody Nobel Peace.
If that is what he wants, what is the problem? We can say that, okay, recommend him for a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, man. See, it's the most worthless piece of prize in the world. Okay, the most undeserving people have gotten that prize. Give it to him also, yeah. For all I care, maybe that will get him off everybody's back. So that when General Bali says there's not much we can do, maybe this is one thing we can do. Second, look, I completely understand where some of these guys, the MAGA crowd, is coming from. The fact of the matter remains that when they say that India is being very arrogant, just because you stand up for your own interests, stand up for your own rights, stand up for your own sovereignty, if that is their definition of arrogance, then yes, I don't have any problem being arrogant, right? Maybe they are not used to dealing with countries which are not ready to call the American president daddy. I don't think anybody in India is going to call him daddy. So if that is the definition of arrogance, I don't have a problem. And then finally, Zafar, on your question on trust. Listen, yaar, in international relations, there's no trust. Nobody trusts anybody. The closest of allies. Let me take a case of, say, for example, Israel and the United States. I don't think you can be closer than them. Yeah. They spy on each other, right? There is no trust. Trust is an overrated commodity as far as international relations is concerned. There are only interests. If your interests match, you will engage with the other side. You will try and get something out of them and give them something. If your interests do not converge, you will not engage with them or you will have differences. It's as simple as that. Trust kahan se aa gaya yaar? Where is the bloody trust? Which
No,
country?
what I mean to say is that the habit of backstabbing of China at the peak of Corona, there is this intrusion in Eastern Ladakh, and you have got this Galwan clashes. So it's very unpredictable. The trust, I'm saying in that context.
Zafar, but the point is that who asked us to assume that the Chinese will not do something like this? Yeah, you keep your powder dry, you keep your forces on the ready, you do not trust anybody. If there is a guy, and in fact, we used to do this. Maybe General Bali will bear me out. The fact is that every time a neighboring country does military exercises near the border, there is a kind of a mirror deployment which takes place, lest somebody gets some funny ideas. It was just an exceptional period of time, the 2020 pandemic, that we decided, okay, fine, if these guys are doing something like this, the counter exercises were not taking place. Had that been happening, or at least you had put some deployments out there, maybe the Chinese would not have tried to intrude, right? So the point is that this is something which we have to internalize. This business that no, it will not. How did Kargil happen? There was an understanding that both sides will, de-induct from the heights when the winter comes, and then go back and occupy those positions. For many years, you followed that protocol. Then one side decided they are going to, short circuit that entire protocol and take those heights before you reach them. That is the origin of Kargil war.
Yeah.
So when will we as a people understand that this whole nonsense that I have a signed agreement that, the way you do property deals in Delhi, that is how you should deal with international relations. You don't take anybody at face value.
Right.
Just keep your powder dry. Make sure that you've protected your front side and your back side when you go in for a property deal in Delhi. That is the same way you deal in international relations. Why would you? Which idiot in the world tells you to trust anybody? There is nothing called trust. That's overrated virtue. That's my view.
Right. Ambassador Veena Sikri, would you agree that it's come at a critical time? We know just 2 months ago, there was this SCO meeting where Defense Minister Rajnath Singh did not sign that document when the question of Pahalgam was not mentioned there. So there are many things that have happened in the past, and what this has come after all of this Trump tariffs, which has rather targeted India more than China, but also China on its target.
Well, let me answer 3 or 4 questions that have been raised. First of all, on the question of trust. Now, let me say that in international relations, while you may not, consider trust in the context that you consider in personal relations, but certainly I think that the factor of trust doesn't mean that you are not going to verify. The old Stalin saying, now many others have appropriated that saying, but the old Stalin saying was trust but verify.
Yeah.
Praveriyai nu praveriyai. You have to trust somebody in international relations, and I can say that certainly Prime Minister Modi, over the last 10 years of a very, very extensive and active diplomatic engagement, he has built up levels of trust with many leaders, and certainly it doesn't mean that you don't stop getting information, you don't stop finding out whether there's somebody else who's doing something else within that country. All that goes on, but personal relations, good personal understanding at the highest level is an important factor which has to be built up with many, many other factors. It cannot be the only factor. And for example, people to people is equally important, and so on. So the purpose of international diplomacy is to consider whom you want to trust, whom you consider you can trust, because you feel afterwards, after you've had the summit meeting, after you think there can be trust, then you have to see whether it's followed up, whether it's implemented, whether the trust is justified or not. All that is there. There is the entire process of diplomatic relations, because when signed agreement, then to go on verifying whether, those people are fulfilling their part of the market. Just as Wang Yi has come to India 10 days ago and promised all kinds of things, urea and tunnel boring machines and rare earth. Well, we have to see whether they actually arrive. Only then you know whether they have. So that's one factor. I think nominating for the Nobel Peace Prize is out of the question because, as I said, our consistent foreign policy is not to have any mediation. Recommending anybody
but we can think out of the box. Just
no, on question of mediation between India and Pakistan, no.
No, on the question of Nobel Prize, on the question of Nobel Peace Prize.
You have to recommend Nobel Peace Prize for a purpose. When you recommend, you have to give a purpose why you're recommending it. Like, people have given his recommendation to him for different purposes. And certainly Asim or whatever, the state of Pakistan would have given a recommendation for talking about Operation. So there's no question of that because we have a consistent policy. We don't break our consistent policy no matter what we think that will happen. And you think that some recommendation for the Nobel Peace Prize will give you a reduction of 25% in tariffs? Not at all. Absolutely not at all. So there is no way. And we, in fact, I would like to say that India's foreign policy based on strategic autonomy and multi-alignment is far above all of this. We're not linking our, the Trump's tariffs with what we are doing with China or with Japan. It's not a zero-sum game for us. We have a policy of multi-alignment. We continue to develop relationships with other countries depending on the situation of the moment. Yes, and you can say that after Galwan, there was a complete dip in Sino-Indian relations, and it was only last year in Kazan at the BRICS summit that President Xi Jinping had a meeting with Prime Minister Modi, and the ice began to thaw. You can say, that there was a little bit of understanding, a little bit of improvement of the situation at the border, but that has to be followed up. Will it lead to disengagement? Will you go back to your peacetime positions? All that there's a lot of stuff to be followed up on. So that we hope that this time that Prime Minister has gone to Tianjin for the SCO summit, and there will be one, maybe two meetings, bilaterals between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi. So let us see what comes out of those bilaterals. Will it lead to some kind of a new roadmap, on trade, on understanding, on the border situation? There's so many formulae which are under discussion after after Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit and his 24th meeting of the special representatives, that we could have different sectors looked at differently, Western sector, middle sector, Eastern, all these, so many formula are being discussed. I don't want to go into that because I don't know which of those will now be taken up again in Tianjin. But we are always looking to have a peaceful border situation. It doesn't mean that the trust with China will come back in a day, but we are always looking to have a situation where at the border, you will have a situation where you can, if the forces disengage and you're a certain amount of kilometers away from each other, then it gives you a much easier monitoring. It gives you a much less fragile situation at the border. So all that is going to go on. And certainly China also has big need for India. They need the Indian markets. And they too are keen to come back. They too have been keen to come back. So there are a lot of issues, and these will all be discussed and looked at. And certainly the world will see what happened when Prime Minister was in Japan. The very successful outcome of the visit, $68 billion of investment in 10 years, technology from Japan, talent from India, make in India for the world. So many positive outcomes, defense and security relations. So whether there's a Quad or no Quad, India and Japan are building up their defense and security relationship very significantly. We're going to have built together a very special naval mast called Unicorn, which is going to be a very complex antenna, which is going to give communication skills for naval vessels. So these are very important decisions in Japan.
So lot of homework has been done in the last 1 year. That's a fact. But also what's happened in last 1 year is the India-Pakistan confrontation, the clash that happened. And China is a factor that cannot be ignored in that. General Bali, Indian military, said that China was providing real-time information to Pakistan, and that really caused problems. At that time, it was not that India was fighting only with Pakistan, but it was also fighting with China. So that is another thing that has to be factored in when we talk about the larger relationship between India and China. This is another sticking point, another elephant in the room.
Let me first go from sublime to the ridiculous and join forces with Sushant and say, let's recommend Donald Trump for Pulitzer Prize in fiction. He deserves that more than anything else. But to come back to this point, No, I would agree with Sushant's theme song. Why are we expecting anything different from China? We have treated them like adversaries. We believe they're adversaries. We are eyeball to eyeball on the line of actual control, where I've served for several years, gone even across to talk to the Chinese. And while the border was always quiet, and there's never been a problem like we had with Pakistanis, but why are we surprised that they were helping the Pakistanis? They would. As a matter of fact, I think time has come for us to do a thoughtful revision of our thinking towards China, move forward cautiously and carefully, deliberately, to improve relationships with China. I am not at all talking about the sentimental days of 1960s, that jalebi-like treacle of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. Not at all. We've got to move forward. We've got to, I think personally, as a layman, we could, for the time being, stop talking about the border question. The Chinese are not talking about it either. We are in any case moving ahead on trade. Our trade has increased from 2020 to now, from something like 58 billion to, I don't know, 127 billion dollars. So we already are having this kind of a thing. Several things Ambassador Sikri listed out, where we have started direct flights. Mansarovar, we can visit again. We can do various things with them. So I think this has to be based not on the fact that as if we have been browbeaten by one power and now we are moving towards another. Because the fact is, we have not been browbeaten. Somebody has tried. Our government and the country has stood firm. We have not been browbeaten. We are moving towards China and to improve relationship based on our own strategic necessities. And I would just end by saying this. For years, we have been given to believe that America wants us to become strong because A, they want our markets, and B, they want us to be a bulwark against an authoritarian China. Now, why the hell should we be a bulwark against anybody? I don't see why should we be playing that game for anyone. Today, we are not the bulwark for Russia, but we are getting slapped for it. And tomorrow, if we have to stand up against China, it makes no sense. I think China, of course, is our neighbor. And if I may say, China is probably the future. So it's a good time to do a little pivot. And by no means am I saying we should pivot away from US. I'm not saying we should do to escalate something, the spat should get worse. Not at all. It is a very balanced approach. But I think let's dilute our adversarial position with China. It's only going to be good. It'll even decrease our vulnerability on the borders. That's what I believe.
Right. That's an important point. That will be something that will be interesting to follow. But Sushant Sareen, look at this hypocrisy of Americans. Trump's advisor says that India is siding with dictators. I heard that soundbite, and he's saying that they are arrogant, they are siding with dictators, they are buying Russian. And what is America doing? What is it siding with?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we seem to have lost the line to Sushant Sareen. Yeah, we'll try and connect him back. But Veena Sikri, the same question to you. That Ambassador
I
Bali,
jump in on that.
General
So
Bali.
just sure, this is hypocrisy. The most astonishing statement I heard was from, I think, Peter Navarro, who said India should start acting like the strategic partner to the US. Is this how you treat your strategic partners? Not only diplomatically, but also publicly. So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy. The Americans don't seem to realize that the days of American exceptionalism are over. They still seem to think that what applies to them doesn't apply to anybody else, which is not the case at all. If you read Fareed Zakaria's book on post-American world, the fact is, what the Americans haven't realized is that while America may not have gone down, but many of us have come up. Many of us have got a different image of ourselves now. So this is complete hypocrisy. They are in bed with a whole lot of dictators. Look at the people they are treating well today. Pakistan, North Korea. They are treating even Putin with kid gloves while they are slapping us for buying oil from him. So I don't think we need to take those words very seriously. And yesterday I was on the show with Barkha and I said the same thing, that I think let's not be too sentimental about the fact that we are a democracy and they are a democracy and therefore they are natural allies and Chinese are not. I don't think so that is true any longer. It's like the famous Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And I think the Americans have given us enough evidence to tell us who they are, who they believe in.
Absolutely. Sushant Sareen is back. We lost you briefly, Sushant. I was asking that Americans are telling Indians that, look, you are siding with dictators. You are buying oil from Russia and you are arrogant and you should rather join democratic forces. What sort of hypocrisy is this? What is America doing business with? Who is America doing business with?
Zafar, the Americans have always done business with dictators. Yeah, when have they not? They loved dictators until the dictators became, inconvenient or irrelevant for them. That is when they went in for regime change. So, again, the word hypocrisy is like, it's part and parcel of foreign policy. Ambassador Veena Sikri, I don't disagree with what she said, trust and verify. But the trust part is diplomacies, right? That is what you say that, yes, I trust you. The verify part is the real thing. How countries, that is the hard power game which countries play with each other. I believe in the verify part, right? So this whole thing, yes, I'll trust anybody. But at the end of the day, I will keep my powder dry. I'm not going to, go into anything blindly simply because I trust somebody. So the point is now going to be that, look, as far as India and China is concerned, yes, we should have good relations with them. There's no doubt about it. The only problem might be that we are probably entering a world where you might, that balancing act that we were trying to do. And again, balancing has been done throughout human history, right? If we were trying to balance China by getting closer to the Americans, the Chinese were also trying to balance us by getting closer to the Pakistanis. The Russians were trying to balance the Europeans by getting close to the Chinese. So this game keeps going on. And the moment we see that, okay, maybe something is becoming unbalanced, then we rebalance ourselves. Again, I agree with General Bali. It's not that we are pivoting away from one to another, but we are rebalancing and trying to find our own equilibrium where, where we can feel comfortable. So the point which I'm trying to make is that as you go forward, you have the Western Bloc under a very capricious American administration, which is like virtually running amok. And if they see that you are trying to rebalance a little bit, will they back off, or will they double down on what they're trying to do? Right. And I don't think you can rule that out. Yeah. And I think when we are preparing scenarios of what India is likely to face, you will have to consider both these scenarios, and both of them are going to be difficult. If the Americans back off from what they have tried to do, even then we will have to then try and see how do we balance between America and the Chinese if there is a thaw coming between India and China. And how does that play out with the Americans? Secondly, if the Americans double down and come in with even more harsh measures against India, then what is our fallback positions? I think we will have to now start considering those possibilities rather than assuming that, okay, maybe 3 years later Trump will go. Trump might go 6 months from now. Just yesterday, Vance was saying that, okay, if Trump goes, I will, serve the country. Maybe he goes 6 months from now. Maybe he goes 3.5 years from now. And whenever he goes, how do you know someone like him is not going to replace him? Yeah. So, I am a little, I would be, looking at a lot more permutations and combinations. We are just not living in the very comfortable world of certainty, which was there maybe 5 years back, 10 years back, 20 years back. We are entering into a world which is full of uncertainty. Things are changing virtually overnight now. Relationships are changing virtually overnight. How do you manage a situation like this? I think that is going to be the big strategic and diplomatic challenge for us. Right. And you just simply, all of these things, we have shared values. Shared values never have held anybody. It's only shared interests. Values and all is the embellishment. I have a shared interest with you, So I'll embellish it that we are brothers, we are this, we are friends, whatever. Ambassador Sikri's service loves using this word. We have cultural, civilizational, historical ties. Has no meaning. Absolutely no meaning. Do you have interests or do you not have interests?
Right.
That's it. Nothing else
Right.
counts.
Right. Veena Sikri, last word to you. Sushant raised an important point about balancing. Will the West now double down or will it back off? India has to be prepared for all the scenarios. What is your analysis?
Look, first of all, let me say 2 points very clearly. I don't think we should attach any importance to what Peter Navarro says because he is a highly discredited among the advisors of President Trump. And even the Secretary of the Treasury said he actually said something and then quickly corrected himself the next day. And all the time there's bipartisan support coming out for why are you doing this with India? Why don't you change? In my view, my theory has always been that President Trump is after a major global deal with China. That is his first priority, seems to be his only priority. And China, first they put those tariffs for 90 days. Now tariffs were, withheld for 90 days. And now they've got another 90-day free pass. So basically, and that deal is not coming through, and China is playing very hardball with USA. And USA is trying to throw every other country under the bus, saying in the interest of getting a good deal with China. So I think we should be aware of all these things that are going on. And my only apprehension is if, President Trump comes up with China on this famous G2 agreement that, China and USA are the big partners and everybody else has to fall in line. Certainly, I think India is not going to accept that. So that is something that we have to be looking at as to why is President Trump doing it. And I would say this: he's even showing China that look, Pakistan card, I also have the Pakistan card. Bangladesh card, I also have the Bangladesh card. And in fact, the deep state that President Trump had promised to get rid of as an election campaign ploy, that deep state is still there. And in fact, it seems to be the same Biden deep state and seems to have a big control on President Trump because they're following exactly the same policies that they were being followed earlier, under President Trump. That's my main point. So I think Indian government has been absolutely correct. We have said that these tariffs are unreasonable, unfair, and unjustified. But we are doing our own corrective action within India. The Make in India, Atmanirbharta, going for GST just in 2 slabs, building up our domestic market, giving more money in the hands of the consumer. All this, helping the exporters who are being harmed by all these things within the country, whatever we can do, and we're not getting into any kind of tutu meme or any kind of leave alone talking on the phone with anybody on this subject, and we're just doing what we have to do, what is right for us. And finally, on the question of on China and the question of saying that, let's go ahead and forget about the border. Let me tell you that with China, we were following that policy. Our policy with them was this, that look, we've got these agreements on peace and tranquility along the border. We will follow the agreements, and we'll, if we follow the agreements, we can put the border issue on a back burner, and we can continue to develop all the other relationships with China, whether it is cultural, civilizational, or trade, economic, etc., etc. But that didn't work. That didn't work because in 2020 in the Galwan, China just tore up all the earlier agreements and came in with those weaponry which looked absolutely horrendous. I mean, we're not supposed to have any kind of dangerous weapons at the border, but they came in with these clubs tied with barbed wire and coil. But then they got a bloody nose for it because we know that they lost a lot of soldiers in Galwan, and but it was a big shock to us as well. So we have been very particular. We have been shoring up our defenses in that area very effectively, and now we are prepared to talk again on the border because Prime Minister Modi and Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar, we have clearly said that peace and tranquility at the border is a vital ingredient. Without that, nothing else will progress. Earlier, the agreements were there on peace and tranquility. They've been torn apart. Now we need to get back to a situation where we can...
Ambassador Veena Sikri, Sushant Sarin wants to come in. Sushantji, please make your point.
Yeah, very quickly, 2 things. One, on the lighter side, Ambassador Sikri talks about G2. I think the best way to shoot down G2 is to tell everybody that this was Obama's idea, right? and because Trump hates Obama, he's not going to follow through with it. So maybe Ambassador Sikri, that is something which we can try out.
But the point is, it's the same deep state that he's listening to, and the same deep state that is telling Obama is now telling President Trump. So there's
Yes.
no more, because he knows whose idea it is. He
But I think
absolutely knows whose idea it is.
we should appeal to Trump's sense that this was Obama's idea, and then you can be rest assured he's not going to go through with it. I can assure you. Second, I think that's a very important point which Ambassador Sikri makes on this border issue. And I tend to agree with her simply because she's correct. You know, all those confidence building measures, all those protocols, all those border management practices that had been worked out between India and China were actually in many cases being observed more in their violation than anything else, right? And I think the real trick between India and China is going to be to try and sort out the border issue. Of course, it will not be easy. It will be extremely difficult. It will involve give and take. It will involve a lot of political capital being, risked, at least on the Indian side, because in the Chinese case, again, it doesn't really matter so much. But in the Indian side, the current dispensation will risk a lot of political capital by trying to get into a deal with China on the border, on the boundary question. But if you can manage that, and I'm not saying you can, but I'm saying that if you manage that, then a lot of your other problems which keep creeping up as far as China is concerned will get sorted out. It'll give you a completely different complexion to the relationship. But if you don't sort this out, and what General Bali was saying, that look, focus on the other less contentious issues. Those less contentious issues become much more contentious because of this border question. So if you can try and sort this out, this is a golden opportunity to try and sort it out. That's my view. There's a point which has come because the Chinese are feeling the heat from the Americans. We have been rubbed the wrong way by them. So there is that opportunity which is there to try and sort out the relationship. If we can manage it, I'm not saying we can.
Right. That's a very important point. General Bali, last word to you before we wrap up.
Very quickly. So I really, if Sushant's best hopes and optimism comes true, nobody will be happier than me, and I'm sure rest of the army. But let's also look at it objectively, that in the last 70, 80 years since we've had this problem, how many times have we had a problem on this border with China? 1985 or 89, Guangdong, and 67 once, and now Galwan. By and large, the border has stayed absolutely quiet and silent. I'm not saying this changes the intent of the Chinese at all. All I'm giving is just a factual position. We have continued to talk to the Pakistanis for several years, even inviting them and going over, even though they've been killing us. But here the incidents have been just 2 or 3. My main issue is this. In early 60s, the Chinese actually approached the Indian government, it's well documented, that they wanted to negotiate the border question based on the McMahon line. The reason why Prime Minister Nehru turned it down is because in his view, the word negotiation meant give and take, correctly defined by Sushant. And Sardar Patel's position was such that Nehru couldn't have given anything. My basic point is that, are we today in a position, any dispensation is in a position to give anything and survive in this country? I doubt it very much. The Chinese want the whole Arunachal Pradesh. How much will you give? What will you give? What will you take?
So, actually, Sushant said that he says that no government is in a position to do that, but he hopes if that is possible, that can happen, then perhaps. Yeah,
I know he said that. I'm not saying ignore the border question. I'm not saying give it away. That somebody said that. Not at all. All I'm saying is, for the time being, let's follow the model that Chinese are following with Taiwan. Let's keep it a little suspended for a bit. Let's get our house in order. Let's get a better economic heft. Let's do other stuff and talk to the Chinese, and then solve the border question if you can. Why not?
Sushant, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say that, look, some of the agreements that have those agreements have been worth anything, but some of the agreements that have been signed between India and China give you a bit of a template for sorting out the problem of the border issue. So, for example, there is that settled populations will not be disturbed, right? If that is already an agreed thing, then the Arunachal question is more or less solved. And if that is a settled principle for reaching some kind of an accommodation, to some extent, even the Aksai Chin question is sorted out. Right? So if you want to do this, again, I agree with what General Bali says. It's going to be extremely difficult, very complicated. How, what are you going to give? But look, let's also face it. If you look at the legal aspects of the India-China conflict, the Chinese position has some validity, as does the Indian position. So the question is, where do you then bring some kind of a middle ground, find some kind of a middle ground, because both sides have their validity. Our constant insistence that it will be that, what is that line called? McMahon line.
McMahon line.
It's the only border, and as though that's been uh, drawn down by Lord God himself. It is not the case, and it has not always been accepted by the Chinese. And there are issues on that. So I think there is space if you want to sort it out. But if you don't want to sort it out, then of course you can carry on with these disputes. वो जैसे हमारे यार again, like in Punjab and Haryana and UP and all these places, land disputes go on for years and decades, centuries. You can continue disputes.
Ambassador Veena Sikri, you want to quickly come in?
Yeah, please. And I think we have to end the argument here, because there is no end to this kind of discussion. Basically, I would say that basically the Chinese, let's take the McMahon line, just because Sushant mentioned it. The Chinese never had an issue on the McMahon line. They have accepted the McMahon line with Burma, now Myanmar. And even with India, they raised the issue of the McMahon line only much later. Claiming the whole of Arunachal Pradesh as theirs, as South Tibet. Anyway, these are endless arguments, and I think that we have to leave it to people who are going to actually be responsible for the negotiations. And it's not that as though we are going to, by taking these positions, there are endless briefs on this, and many experts and expert groups and people who have been working on this. And I think that we just have to hope for the best from the discussions between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, two sets of rounds, and we hope that we will be able to move ahead on that. But there is a new normal in place, and we don't accept any terrorist acts. Every act of terror is an act of war. So I think India's position on that is very important. So I think that if we look at talks with any other part of the world, so please let's not just go into this again and again and again, but leave it to the talks that are going to be held now.
Leave it to the talks that are going to be held. On that note, we come to the end of this discussion. Thanks so much, Ambassador Veena Sikri, Sushant Sareen, and General Bali for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts. And thanks to our viewers for watching the Mojo Story. Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.